Greece is picking up the pieces after its worst night of rioting in years. 45 buildings wholly or partly destroyed by fire amid overnight demonstrations against Parliament's new and even more radical austerity plan, lower salaries, the sale of state assets, all this in a bid to avoid national bankruptcy. There's also the political fallout. For Greek voters who reject the deal, this all will mean a snap general election, which has been called for April. By then, either the dust will have settled or Athens will have taken the plunge, exiting the euro and a currency too strongly valued for its economy. Germany's finance minister now hints that a Greek default is a genuine option, as he continues to preach tough love with outside control on revenue collection in Greece. But is that really what Germany and the rest of Europe want? And to save its economy, must Greece now give up a measure of its sovereignty? Today in the France 24 debate, we are looking at the situation in Greece and asking what the situation will be as Athens burns. The France 24 debate, which you can follow on Facebook and on Twitter. And with us to talk about it from Athens, Alexander Theodorakis. He's a protester who is in the thick of things. Thanks for joining us. Also with us, Thomas Clow of the European Council on Foreign Relations, Marcus Kerber, who teaches at Berlin's Technische Universität, and Craig Kopidis, a journalist and author of, among others, Mona Lisa's Pajamas. Thanks for being with us. As we were saying, the France 24 debate, where you've been weighing in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. By the way, it wasn't just Athens Sunday evening. There were riots in Greece's second city, Thessaloniki, as well as many other towns, both on the mainland and the islands of Crete and Corfu. In the capital, they turned out by the tens of thousands. And those just some of the images that happened on Sunday evening, and the rioting went well into the night. Alexander Theodorakis, you were there. Why did the violence escalate as it did?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about how it showed to me. We were like 500,000 people in the streets of Athens yesterday, and as usual, there's a part of the protesters that turns violent, and it happens all the time. But yesterday it was the worst riots I've ever seen since the 2008 riots after the death of Alexandros Grigoropoulos.
Why do you think that there was this escalation?
Because of the second austerity plan that was going to be voted and that passed yesterday, and because of people that are really upset with the policies carried out by the government.
You yourself, you've been going to these demonstrations now for months and months. Is there a feeling now, I guess you could say, of desperation? Have things tangibly taken a turn for the worse the past months among those that you're friends with?
Definitely, you can see the misery in everyday life here in Greece, in the face of people in the metro, while going to work, coming back from work. Everybody's feeling miserable. Nobody can really have good thoughts about the future.
Craig Kopidis, your thoughts? Athens, a city you know well, when you see those images.
It's beyond tragic. It's gotten to the point where using the Greek classical myth metaphors no longer work. Members of my family were in the streets there last night, which I never would have believed was possible.
These are people who don't ordinarily demonstrate.
Oh, no. No.
Why were they out there?
This is what people do when they believe they have no future. We've seen this in other parts of the world, whether it be the Middle East, Iraq. This is a a sea change event is going on here in Europe, I would argue in the world. I think this could be the biggest event since the fall of the Soviet Union, which was something I was around to cover at the time. What you're seeing is the implosion of a Western country, a Western democracy. You're seeing a nation of very stubborn and very proud people who basically wrote the playbook for Western civilization out of Plato's Academy, that everything that we in the West hold dear, from science to economics in the West, was born in Greece. That legacy is very clear. And you're seeing all of this melting right before our eyes. And despite what I think are the best efforts of many politicians and the not so best efforts of some bankers, and 40 years of failure by Greek politicians, you're seeing this shameful collapse of a nation. The arithmetic of recovery in Greece, whether it's the EU or the IMF or the banks who want to come in to save at the last minute, it doesn't work. It never worked. It hasn't worked for 2.5 years, and everyone's known it. Despite this, you have, Angela Merkel, who, for a lot of people now, is the laughing stock of Europe for trying to have saved Greece from burning. Anyone who tells you that they know what's going to happen there tomorrow, I would immediately dub a liar, because they don't know. I think other than we're going to see more of these horrible scenes.
All right, so there's rage, there's outrage, and perhaps also a bit of a disconnect with the mood outside of Greece. There's going to be an EU finance ministers meeting on Wednesday to approve the bailout plan. And this was the mood out of Brussels this Monday, the rioting sparking condemnation.
I also wish to join my voice to the Greek government in condemning the unacceptable violence that took place yesterday in Athens. These individuals who are responsible for this violence do not represent the vast majority of Greek citizens who are genuinely concerned for the future of their country and are showing determination and resilience.
Thomas Klau, today at the European Council on Foreign Relations, when you were perusing the papers, looking at what happened overnight, did you see things as dramatically as Craig was describing them?
It's a very painful process. I think in some ways the transition that Greece has to go through can really be compared to the transition that the EU's new member states had to go through after they left the Soviet bloc, and the economic system had to be reinvented, collapsed, and the political system had to be reinvented. It's as painful, but it's much more difficult. Why? The former Soviet countries, who went through years of very, very tough social conditions, had a population that collectively, or for its vast majority, left a place they didn't want to be in and hoped for a better future. The difficulty in Greece is that the rise in living standards, which accompanied the first decade of the euro, was really based on a collective illusion, shared to some extent by Eurozone countries, but also by Greek society and politics themselves. So they're going from a good place to a place of, through a period of indefinite, very, very great pain, with an uncertain future at the end of the road, and they don't know how long the road is going to be. That breeds despair. And of course, the sense shared, I think, by many Greeks, that the political class that is collectively responsible for the situation they're in still hasn't collectively developed a sense of responsibility and an ability to project, if you like, a narrative that will about how to take the country out of this feeds despair. The other thing, of course, which we mustn't forget is that Greece as a society and the Greek politics are politics which, until not so very long ago, were riven by major conflict. There was a civil war in Greece, a very, very violent one after World War II, a dictatorship in the relatively recent past, a deep cleavage between the left and the right. This is not a society that, if you like, has historically been at peace for many decades after World War II. And this feeds, of course, into everything that we see right now. So I think it's important to understand that. And it's important for other Europeans to engage with Greece's recent history to understand why it's coming to this.
And do you think the rest of Europe understands?
Not sufficiently, I think. I think there is a tendency to go for superficial value judgments, to say, oh, you know, they're lazy, they lived above their means, you know, there's corruption in the tax collecting administration. Much of that is true in parts. But I think there is a failure to engage with Greece. And, you know, important facts, Germany's debt was partly forgiven by, the Debtors' Club in 1953. Very positive conditions, of course, to stop West Germany from falling under the sway of the Soviet Empire. So extending help to a country that is in trouble, partly because of its own devastating policies, but then the German policies during World War II were far more devastating, of course, you know, by any measure than anything that Greece inflicted essentially upon itself. Helping a country that is in trouble should be a normal feature of European politics, and this needs to be said and stated strongly.
There is no Soviet Union anymore, Marcus Kerber, so the Greek bargaining position is a lot weaker.
It is not only a lot weaker because it has to justify a position which is no longer tenable, saying we had a good past, more than 30 years of subsidies from the European Union, more than 100 billion euros having been paid through regional structural funds to Greece to make Greece become a competitive country. And now they live up to the true reality, realizing that there was a collective illusion. So maybe that Greece has no future, but what I'm more concerned about is the future of the European community, of the European Union. I said quite clear at the very beginning of the unsuccessful rescue efforts as far as Greece is concerned, that Greece becomes some sort of cancer for the European community. If you bail out Greece, you cannot deny any further bailout, because Greece, the population, the political class, altogether, they are responsible for what happened. Not only in moral terms, in terms of political governance. And what happens there is painful to see, but it is the logic consequence, not only of a totally illusory rescue policy from 2010 onwards, but from a continuous refusal to stop the bailout policy towards Greece and to make a deal with Greece, making a clear cut and giving them financial assistance to leave the Eurozone as soon as possible, and to give them the time the people need, that is to say, a generation, to reform the state, to improve governments, and to find the way back to democracy, because there is no legitimacy to request sacrifices of the dimension the Troika is now not only demanding, is requesting, is urging upon the Greek people. There is a growing split between the request of a large and significant part of the population and what a small elite of more or less corrupt and illegitimate politicians in Greece and unelected experts want. And we can no longer bridge that split. And finally, we are sacrificing something which is the business card of our continent due to our friends from Greece, democracy. So shall we continue to sacrifice democracy for rescuing unsuccessfully the euro? Greece is not comparable, what happens there, to the decadence of the Soviet Union. Greece is, my friend, not an empire. It's a small country, relatively unimportant for the rest of Europe. And we can, there. And unless you forget about the enormous help which has been given to Greece, not only now, but for more than 30 years. So we should come up with a new deal. And what I expect politicians to do is to pronounce facing up to reality, as de Gaulle did when he said, Algeria, it's gone. Let's face it. And this is what politics should very quickly do. So are you suggesting that they cut ties with, that the European Union cut ties with Greece, or just the Eurozone? I think it is immediately necessary for Greece and for responsible people inside Greece, outside Greece, to come up with the conclusion that Greece has no chance for economic survival inside the Eurozone. This is the first statement. And we are in a prisoner dilemma because all those people who said, let us save Greece, said in 2010, such as Mr. Trichet, with this superb Parisian arrogance, it is absurd for Greece to leave the Eurozone. Nothing was more absurd for Greece to demand or to request Greece to remain unconditionally in the Eurozone.
Let me ask Alexander Theodorakis, do you agree with Marcus Kerber?
I agree to an extent, but one has to take into account that imagine if all the southern countries create a bloc and negotiate all together, I think it will change completely the situation.
Let me ask you, Craig Kapitas, do you see that as being feasible at this point? Or is it going to be, are we going to follow this like a domino effect?
I really don't want to agree with that logic, but it makes a lot of unfortunate sense. What happened here was just as much the responsibility of the masters of the European Union as it was of the Greek people, and I don't think we can forget about that. Number two, you cannot forget about the fact that to pull Greece out of the Eurozone is to cast them adrift, not only without a lifeboat, but without even a life jacket. The structural problem going forward is as follows. When Papandreou couldn't run the country,
the former prime minister.
Yeah, New Democracy. They had the New Democracy on the right, or PASOK on the left. Both of them failed for years. Brussels decided to back one of their own, a technocrat. Let's bring in a Brussels technocrat. And the Greek people finally understood that they had to bring in the current prime minister, Lucas Papadimos.
Former central bank governor.
The central bank governor, who's a very capable man, a very smart man, a very wise man, one of the few left there. But maybe the medicine came in too late. What I see here is the destabilization, again, as I said before, of a Western European democracy. And this is very frightening, because if Greece goes down, if it leaves the Eurozone, well, how soon until Italy and Portugal and Ireland and who else?
And we'll pick up on that point when we come back.
And that's an important point.
It is an important point. When we come back, we'll pick up on the issue of the political consequences of a Greek default. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.